It's been months since anyone heard her name. Not in a whispered rumor, not in a bold challenge, not even in a passing mention by a commentator trying to fill dead air. In the accelerated world of professional wrestling, 6 months is an eternity. It's long enough for a legacy to tarnish, for a memory to fade, for a revolution to begin, peak, and end. New faces had taken her place. New catchphrases echoed in the arenas. The women's championship, the very title she had redefined, was now held by a new era star, a hungry, brilliant competitor who had clawed her way to the top and defended it with honor. The show, as it always does, went on. The universe had seemingly moved on. The throne sat empty, collecting dust, a relic of a past reign. Fans had accepted the silence. Maybe the fire was gone. Maybe the injuries were too severe. Maybe, just maybe, the Queen had simply abdicated. Tonight was just another show. A standard main event was underway. The crowd was loud, but it was a familiar, predictable noise. They were reacting on cue, waiting for the 2 count, chanting for the local hero. It was routine, until the lights went out. A sudden, plunging darkness. Not a flicker, but an execution. The arena noise died instantly, replaced by a confused, nervous hum. And then, the single, unmistakable chime. The first note of a song they thought they might never hear again. The entire WWE universe exploded. She's back, and the throne is hers again. To understand the explosion, you must first understand the silence that preceded it. This wasn't a normal absence. This wasn't a storyline injury where a competitor vows revenge from a hospital bed. This was a digital vanishing act. Her social media went dark. Her name was scrubbed from future event posters. The company itself seemed to treat her as a ghost, a chapter they had collectively agreed to close without reading the final page. This silence created a vacuum. In that vacuum, speculation festered. Was she in dispute? Was she burnt out? Was she, as the darkest corners of the internet whispered, simply done? This void changed the division she built. The other women fought bravely, but they were fighting in a shadow she still cast. Every new champion was measured against her. Every classic match was compared to her main events. They were trying to build a new kingdom, but they were doing it on the foundations of her old one. The fans felt it, even if they didn't say it. There was an asterisk next to the new champion's name. A sense of, yes, but... The silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was an absence of legitimacy. It was a question mark hanging over the entire roster. The silence became a character in itself. A quiet, heavy antagonist that made every victory feel temporary, every celebration feel hollow. They needed closure. They needed an answer. They needed the sound to stop. Or they needed the music to start. When the first note of her music hit, it wasn't just sound. It was a physical force. It was a shockwave that hit the front row and radiated outwards, a concussive blast of pure disbelief. For a full second, there was no cheer. There was only a single, unified gasp from 20,000 people. It was the sound of 20,000 different what-if scenarios crashing into a single, undeniable reality. Grown men, clad in the merchandise of her rivals, suddenly looked like children on Christmas morning. Women in the audience, who had watched her headline shows when it was deemed impossible, found their hands covering their mouths, tears welling instantly. She didn't run to the ring. She didn't pump her fist. She just appeared. Standing at the top of the ramp, bathed in a spotlight that seemed to have been waiting for her, she looked out at the sea of humanity she had left behind. She wasn't wearing her elaborate robes. She wasn't wearing the crown. She was simply herself, and that was more than enough. The noise that followed the gasp was not a cheer. It was a roar. It was a primal, guttural release of months of frustration, speculation, and forgotten loyalty. It was the sound of the butt finally being erased. She slowly walked down the ramp, not as a returning hero, but as a monarch returning to a palace she had allowed others to borrow. The air wasn't just electric, it was suffocating. Let's talk about that fan in the third row. The one who was filmed, the one who became the face of the reaction. He wasn't crying because his favorite character returned. He was crying because his story got its hero back. Wrestling isn't just about what happens in the ring. It's about the emotional investment we make. We attach our own struggles to theirs. We see our own desire for recognition in their quest for a championship. When she vanished, a part of his story vanished too. It was an unresolved chord. Her return wasn't just a plot twist, it was a personal validation. It was the universe telling him that you can come back from silence. You can reclaim what was yours. Across the arena, thousands of similar private moments were happening. People weren't just looking at the ramp. They were grabbing their friends, their partners, their children. They were sharing the shock, confirming with each other that this was real. Phones were forgotten. The instinct to record was momentarily overridden by the need to experience. This was the magic they chase. This is why they buy the tickets. It's not for the predictable wins or the scripted promos. It's for the gasp. It's for the moment that breaks the script. The moment that feels so real, it transcends the business. The Queen's return wasn't a corporate decision. For those 5 minutes, it was an emotional miracle. It was the comeback they didn't know they were still waiting for. Now let's go backstage, to the gorilla position, the small, pressurized area just behind the curtain. Here the sound was different. It wasn't a roar of joy. It was the sound of chaos. The current women's champion, just minutes away from her own championship defense, was staring at the monitor. Her face was a mask of cold realization. This was her show. This was her time. And in the span of a single musical note, it was all gone. The crowd that had chanted her name just last week was now chanting for a ghost. All the work, all the matches, all the sacrifice. It suddenly felt like she was just a placeholder. She wasn't the champion. She was the one keeping the throne warm. Producers were yelling into headsets, their carefully planned show now in ashes. Writers were frantically tearing up scripts. The main event was ruined. Or perhaps the main event had just been saved, depending on who you asked. The other competitors, waiting for their own matches, just stood aside. They knew the hierarchy. They knew that when the Queen is in the building, everyone else is just a member of the court. The power dynamic of the entire locker room didn't just shift, it fractured. Resentment, fear, and a terrifying, unspoken awe filled the air. She hadn't said a word, she hadn't touched anyone, but the Queen had just defeated the entire roster without ever stepping through the ropes. The message was clear. The real main event was back. The show ends. The trucks pack up. But for the current champion, the night is just beginning. She sits alone in the locker room, the metallic scent of the title still on her shoulder. But the gold feels cold tonight. She did everything right. She was the company's new face. She was reliable. She was talented. She was the future. And in 3 minutes, the past just walked in and erased her. She replays the sound of the crowd. That sound wasn't for her. It was a sound she had never been able to get, not even on her best night. It was the sound of adoration, not just respect. She had earned their respect. The Queen commanded their adoration. The champion's phone buzzes. It's an alert from a sports website. The headline isn't about her upcoming defense. The headline is just one word: returned. She throws the phone into her bag. This is the new war. It won't be fought in the ring, not at first. It will be fought in her own mind. It's the battle against her own insecurity, the whisper that tells her she was never good enough, that she was just the interim champion in a reign that never truly began. She knows what's coming. The comparisons, the dream match speculation, the fans online already dismissing her. The Queen's shadow, which she had fought so hard to escape, was no longer a shadow. It was an eclipse. By morning, it wasn't a wrestling story. It was a global one. The Queen Returns was trending higher than world news, higher than movie releases. Sports networks that usually mocked wrestling were leading their broadcasts with it. Podcasts that had declared her finished We're now uploading emergency episodes, the hosts tripping over themselves to analyze her expression, her walk, her future. The return wasn't just a moment, it was a content engine. It was a billion-dollar exclamation point. The company's stock price ticked upwards in pre-market trading. Why? Because certainty is boring. Predictability is death. The return of the Queen was the return of the ultimate what happens next. This media storm changed the landscape for everyone. Suddenly, tickets for next week's show were gone. Scalpers were demanding absurd prices. Fans who hadn't watched in years were setting their DVRs, texting their old friends, "Did you see?" The return activated a dormant army. But this avalanche also buried everyone else. The men's champion, the tag team division, every other storyline. They were all footnotes. The media didn't care about the complex narratives built over the last 6 months. They only cared about the throne. This is the Queen's gravity. She doesn't just join the story, she bends the entire narrative universe around her, forcing everyone else into her orbit. The arena is silent again. The fans are gone. The production trucks have rumbled off into the night. The Queen is in the back of a black car, speeding down a dark highway. The adrenaline is fading, and the quiet is rushing in. This is the part they don't show on camera. The part after the explosion. She just stared at the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. The sound of the crowd is still ringing in her ears, but it's different now. It's an echo. It's a demand. They weren't just cheering for her. They were cheering for what they expect from her. They weren't welcoming back a person. They were welcoming back an icon. And icons aren't allowed to be tired. Icons aren't allowed to be uncertain. She had just made the biggest statement of her career by doing nothing at all, and now she had to follow it. The pressure of this return was infinitely heavier than the pressure of her debut. When she debuted, she had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Now, she had everything to lose and nothing, seemingly, left to prove. She had already been the champion. She had already been in the main event. She had come back from the silence, but what if she had nothing new to say? The silence was safe. The silence was private. The roar of the crowd was a cage, and she had just willingly walked right back into it. The crown wasn't on her head, it was on the seat next to her. And it looked heavy. Her phone, which had been buzzing non-stop with texts from colleagues and congratulations from rivals, finally rings with the one call that matters. It's her father, the king. The man whose legacy is the blueprint for her own. The man who cast the shadow she has spent her entire life trying to fill, and then to exceed. She answers. His voice is quiet, gravelly, and proud. He doesn't say, "Congratulations." He says, "It's about time." He talks about the family name, about the business, about how the throne always belongs to them. It's a conversation they have had 100 times. But tonight, it feels different. She listens, saying little. "Yes, Dad. I know. I will." He reminds her that she isn't just a star. She is the star. That she isn't just there to participate. She is there to own. He is pouring gasoline on a fire she wasn't even sure she wanted to light again. As he speaks, she realizes the truth. She didn't just come back for herself. She came back for him. She came back for the name on her back. She is trapped in a story that was written for her before she was even born. The phone call ends. The Queen hangs up, the weight of a dynasty settling onto her shoulders. She had returned to the spotlight, only to find herself deeper in her father's shadow than ever before. It's the next week. The arena is so packed, the fire marshal is nervous. The air is thick with anticipation. The entire show has been building to this one segment. The new champion is in the ring, holding her title. She looks defiant, scared, and angry all at once. She calls out the Queen, and the music hits again. This time, the crowd is ready. The roar is deafening. The Queen walks to the ring, her pace deliberate. She's in her full gear now, the robe, the regalia. She is the image of power. She steps through the ropes and stands face to face with the champion. The champion, to her credit, doesn't back down. She holds the title up, right in the Queen's face. A simple, non-verbal question. You want this? Come and take it. The Queen doesn't even look at the championship. She just smiles. A cold, knowing smile. A producer hands her a microphone. This is the moment. The moment the entire world is waiting for. What is her mission? What is her demand? The crowd is hushed, hanging on a silence that feels louder than the music. The Queen raises the microphone, and then, slowly, she lowers it again. She looks at the champion, and then at the title belt. She shakes her head, ever so slightly. The champion's defiant look falters, replaced by pure, naked confusion. What does that mean? The Queen's smile widens. She didn't come back for the champion. She didn't even come back for the title. The champion is confused. The crowd is confused. The Queen turns her back on her would-be rival. She walks to the ropes and looks out, not at the fans, but through them. She is looking at something no one else can see. That's when we realize the truth. The return wasn't about the championship. The championship was just the excuse. It was the only way to get the world's attention. The 6 months of silence weren't recovery. They were clarity. She realized that the throne, the crown, the legacy, it was all a cage. A beautiful, gilded cage built for her by her father. A cage she had been trapped in her entire life, chasing a ghost, chasing his approval. She didn't come back to reclaim her throne. She came back to abdicate. She turns back to the stunned champion. She slowly, deliberately, begins to clap. She is applauding her. She nods, a sign of genuine respect. Then, the Queen unfastens the robe, the symbol of her royalty, and lets it fall to the mat. She steps over it and out of the ring. She is not the Queen anymore. The champion is left holding a title that suddenly means everything, and the Queen is walking up the ramp, finally free. The silence she endured wasn't an absence, it was an education. And the return wasn't a comeback, it was a goodbye. The throne is empty again. But this time, it's by her choice.